The late morning was too quiet. In this corner of the reserve, even the wind seemed to hesitate. No birds, no insect hum, just the brittle hush of dry grass shifting slightly and the creak of sun-bleached trees. It was the kind of quiet that didn't soothe. It pressed. And for the ranger moving slowly through the tall acacia fringe, it was the kind of silence that meant something had gone wrong. He wasn't patrolling, not officially, just walking a seldom-used cut trail, boots soft in the dust, following nothing in particular. Until he noticed the drag. A faint groove in the earth, like something heavy had shifted sideways, then stopped. One tuft of grass had been flattened unnaturally, another patch torn by something coiled and thin. He crouched and touched the ground. There were no tracks leading away. Whatever had moved here had not left. A few meters ahead, a shallow dip in the land opened into a depression of scattered thorns, compacted earth, and torn brush. At first it looked like shadow or a patch of fallen limbs, but then he saw the slow rise and fall of breath, and the dull, dark curve of an ear flicking once against a fly. It was an elephant, a young adult female, perhaps not yet full-grown. She lay on her side, half covered in dust and branches, her body still. Her left front leg was stretched forward, taut at an unnatural angle, and near the joint where skin gave way to tendon, a length of thick metal wire curled tight. Too tight. The snare had wrapped high and deep, biting into the flesh where bone could not defend her. The leg was swollen around it, cracked and dark. She had stopped pulling. That much was clear. There were deep grooves in the dirt where she had once tried to wrench herself free. Backward, sideways, even in circles. But not anymore. Her eyes were open, watching. Not wild, not tame, just watching. The ranger stayed still, crouched, no fast movements, no sounds, only his breath joining hers in the afternoon heat. She didn't shift when he stood, didn't blink when he stepped back and radioed. His voice was low. Found one. Snared. Alive. The others arrived within the hour. 3 more rangers, 1 vet. They brought water, canvas, and soft-roped poles, not to pull, but to shade. The truck stayed back. No engines near her. They approached slowly, on foot, hands empty. She turned her head once as they neared. Her ears flicked again, not in panic, just registering. The wire was coiled deep into the muscle, likely weeks old. The foot beyond it looked half dead, the toes unmoving. But the leg still trembled now and then. A pulse of instinct, maybe pain, maybe protest. The vet knelt nearby. "She's quiet," he said under his breath. "Too quiet." They laid the soaked cloth across her back, then over her side. One ranger trickled water from his hand to the base of her trunk. The droplets slid into cracked skin. She didn't lift it, but she let them come. Another sat behind, her barely touching, just close enough that his breath might be felt. "It's okay, girl," he whispered once. Nothing else. They didn't cut immediately. The wire had to be untwisted, not yanked. One slip, and it could tear deeper. The vet used gloves, pliers, and slow turns. The sound it made coming loose was not loud, but the ranger watching flinched anyway. It sounded like something breaking that should not break. Beneath the wire, the wound opened. Not fresh, this had festered long. But there was no bleeding, just a deep heat rising from the gash. "Infection," the vet murmured. But she was strong, still breathing, still present, still watching. When the last loop of cable was removed, the leg didn't move. She didn't test it. She didn't stand. Just lay there, surrounded by quiet humans who now had nothing left to do but wait. They set up canvas shade. They dabbed salve on the wound. They gave her space. But she did not rise. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the clearing, the only movement was the soft twitch of her tail and the brief flutter of her eyes when the wind shifted. The ranger closest to her had stayed kneeling the entire time. His knees ached, his hands were stiff, but he did not stand. "She's not panicked," he said softly. "That's what makes it worse." Because panic could be soothed, could be treated with calm voices, with distance, with time. But this stillness, this watching, meant something else. She wasn't trapped anymore. She wasn't tied, but she also wasn't trying to go. The vet suggested sedation if she grew restless. But she didn't. She barely blinked. The others spoke quietly, a few steps back, out of her line of sight. One mentioned how snares often caught the wrong animals. Built for smaller prey, they still held the ones too large to slip free. They guessed she'd been alone when it happened. No tracks around her, no prints of a herd trying to help or fleeing after the trap snapped. Just one long drag, and then nothing. One of the younger rangers asked, "Why didn't she cry?" The vet didn't answer. He just looked at her, and the sun lowered behind them all, casting a thin golden light across the back of her ear, her side, the wound that no longer bled. She was free, but she did not move, only breathed, only watched. The snare now lay coiled beside her, its twisted wire glinting dull in the dust. The ranger who found her didn't touch it. He just looked at the thing for a long while, then turned back to her face. Still watching, still waiting. And the wind, soft again, moved through the branches above her, gently, like something passing through without stopping. They didn't leave when the wire came away. The coil lay dull beside her in the dust, and heat settled over the clearing. She kept her head on the ground, eyes open, breath shallow and regular, the kind of breathing that spends nothing extra. The rangers shifted into quieter work, as if their bodies knew before their minds that speed would not help. One knelt where he had been, a steady shape beyond the sweep of her ear. Another moved slow along her side, wringing water from cloth and laying it over skin that had cracked under weeks of sun. They cleaned without lifting the leg. The flesh around the snare mark was hard and hot, the skin splitting where it met old mud. Flies drifted and were brushed away with a leafy branch. A diluted antiseptic changed the gash from dust to faint brown, and the smell from metal to sharp clean. When the vet drew up a dose of long-acting antibiotic, he kept his head lowered as if not to startle the day. The needle went high where muscle would hold, and the orange cap returned to the syringe with a quiet click. The canvas shade followed the sun inch by inch, a traveling patch the wind kept lifting and setting down. Near her mouth, they poured a trickle of water and waited until she drew it in with a slow breath. The ranger at her head whispered a line only once, not leaning closer, not asking for anything. "Easy, girl." After that, he was silent. Small sounds returned. The dry chafe of grass, a dove calling then falling quiet, seed pods rattling in a thorn bush nobody had noticed until now. By mid-afternoon, they knew injury alone was not the reason she would not move. Elephants in pain will try. They strain, they shift, they test the ground. She did none of that. She listened with her body. When a gust crossed the valley, her ear tilted to meet it, then settled. When the shade moved, her eyes followed the edge and returned to stillness. It seemed the earth beneath her held a weight greater than its own. They took her temperature with calm, measured motions. The reading was high, but not the worst the vet had seen. Hydration signs sat on a border, gums pale, skin slow to settle. He marked time by her breaths, counting quietly for a minute, then another. The others kept the clearing orderly. A jackal that had circled earlier read the place as occupied and moved on. Flies pressed, then lifted when a cooler thread of air slipped down from the ridge and crossed her face. The ranger who had found her pinched a handful of dust and let it go. It rose, turned, and fell across the wire coil before disappearing into soil that had kept this record. The drag, the turn, the surrender to stillness. He did not touch the cable. That belonged to the story that had ended. The one happening now had no metal in it. It was quieter and not yet understood. He watched her eye instead, the heavy lashes still, the dark surface reflecting a thin line of sky. They tried a soft mash thinned with water, set in a broad pan where she could scent it. She smelled it without moving. The trunk tip lifted, trembled, lowered. Her gaze steadied on nothing they could see. The decision to wait was spoken only to agree with what they were already doing. The vet sat back on his heels. Another folded onto the ground, the way he might in the shade of a truck tire, except there was no truck here. The clearing had taken the role of every shelter. The youngest ranger, speaking into his own chest, wondered what she was holding for. No one answered. The question was not a request. It was a shape naming itself in the air. The oldest among them had seen animals refuse before, a buffalo standing over a drowned calf, a zebra lingering at a fence long after the herd moved. He knew the look, the gravity drawn from somewhere beyond the wound. He did not offer it as a theory. He kept it where it belonged, in the quiet. They watched the horizon, but not for danger. The reserve lay empty in the afternoon glare, a basin of brittle grass, thorn clumps, and ridges worn like old scars. Now and then dust lifted and fell, exactly the way dust always did. Nothing moved that they could point to. Yet the elephant angled an ear toward the open country and held it there. Her mouth opened a fraction, closed again, and the next breath came longer. If she had been standing, it might have looked like listening. Late light thinned and softened the canvas shadow across her flank. They cleaned the wound again and laid a new strip of wet cloth above the swelling. Under the crusted mud, darker skin showed in patches that would be hidden if she were upright. A small beetle crossed the dust near her face and her lashes trembled once. Otherwise, she was a stillness with weight. The vet checked pulse and capillary return. Slow, steady, tired. He lifted his eyes and tilted his head, an agreed signal that meant we continue. They discussed rigging a sling for support or at least a shift, but the slope and brush argued against it, and the vet shook his head. They had cut her free from the human thing. They would not bind her to a human plan. The choice to rise had to remain hers. In that waiting, their work became presence. Fresh water, shade, the soft pass of a branch over an ear. The patients learned from other rescues where time itself was a part of the treatment. She lifted her trunk a hand's width and let it fall against the dirt, not in defeat, but like a marker set to hold a place. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a dove kept repeating 2 notes until the sound threaded into breathing. When the wind shifted, it carried a dry scent from the east. Sun on stone, old grass, something distant and hard to name. She drew it in and held it. The ranger near her shoulder felt the pause as if it ran through his own chest before releasing. They kept voices low. When ants began to gather in the spilled mash, one ranger knelt and persuaded them to arc away with a twig. The vet checked her again, counting beats under thick skin with careful pressure. The numbers steadied, then dipped, then steadied, the way evening settles. He met their eyes and spoke only with his face. They understood. The work remained the same. Shade water. Waiting. Evening edged the clearing before they knew how much of the day had slipped. The sky lost its glare and turned thin blue glass. A faint breeze combed the grass and brought a cooler smell from the flats. Bats stitched brief arcs above the thorn line and were gone. She flexed her jaw and made a sound so small they almost missed it. Breath with a tremor at the end. It did not read as pain. It read as recognition of something that had not yet arrived. "You're safe," the ranger at her head said, a line spoken to the ground as much as to her. After it, no more words. They lit nothing when darkness gathered under the trees. No lanterns, no phones. The clearing held its own dim outline, a bowl of coolness in a hot season. She lay within it like a stone a river decided to leave. Her ears moved now and then, catching small night noises that braided the silence into something livable. A gecko click, a nightjar's rough call, hoofbeats far away on bare earth. They divided the night without speaking, not from fear of predators but because the watching mattered. The ranger at her head stayed to start, hands flat on his thighs, his breathing soft and deliberate. He watched the rise and fall of her ribs and the way moonlight, when it finally climbed, touched the curve of her shoulder, turned salved skin to a pale seam, and silvered the wire coil where it lay beside the drag that had brought her here. If he expected change, he did not show it. He followed her breathing and matched it. She did not rise, but refusal softened into intention into waiting, and the waiting grew a shape none of them could name. The grass learned it first, leaning one way then another as wind readied itself for a different story. The rangers, by not asking more questions, allowed whatever it was to draw nearer without being defined too soon. Somewhere past the ridge, a silence held steady like a door almost opening. They breathed with her, held their place, and let the night go on. By the third day, the waiting had deepened into something slower than time. The elephant had not risen. She had not tried. Her leg remained stretched out, the wound still angry but clean, wrapped and treated twice daily. There was no sign of worsening, yet also no sign of shift. No weight placed, no shuffle of hindquarters. She drank only when the water was near enough to breathe in, and only a little. No panic, no protest. Stillness, shaped like memory. The rangers stayed with her in shifts. One by one they circled through, some returning before their watches were over. Something about the clearing didn't want to be left alone. The canvas moved with the light. The water bowl was kept full. The wire had been moved to the edge of the tree line, not discarded, just set aside, too sharp a reminder to leave close, too meaningful to bury. In the afternoons, heat pressed the land flat and sound fell away. The grass grew quieter, even the birds flew higher, and the world shrank down to breath and dust and the scrape of cloth being dipped again into water. It was nearing sunset when the wind changed. A shift from the north, cooler and edged with distance, like something returning from far away. The light had gone amber, smearing long shadows across the brush. One ranger crouched near her flank, wiping dust from the cloths. Another stood to stretch and scanned the horizon almost without thought, the way a person does when their body remembers to look. And then the sound came. Low, slow, too deep to be close. It rolled not like thunder but like a thought voiced under breath, a rumble that pressed first into bone, then into silence. The standing ranger paused, hand still on his belt. His eyes didn't narrow, didn't search. They simply opened wider, then fixed. A second ranger heard it next. The one by her side stopped wringing cloth and rose slowly. The elephant's ear tilted slightly, not sharply, not fast, just enough to shift direction. Her eye did not blink. The sound came again, this time not alone. From beyond the northern ridge, farther than most herds ventured during dry season, came the echoing answer. Not a call, not urgency, but a shape in sound, a layering of tones so low the trees didn't carry them. The earth did. It was the language of weight and belonging, and the elephant lying in the dust pulled one breath deeper than she had all day. She did not lift her head, but her trunk moved. Not up, not reaching, just curled faintly toward her flank, a gesture that suggested memory, or preparation. The rangers turned toward the ridge. No one stepped forward. They did not call out or wave or speak. They waited. And then, through the trees that dust and heat had made shimmer for days, 4 shapes began to form. Large, slow, deliberate. The first crested the low rise, pausing at the top. A second joined. Then the third and fourth. They did not descend. They did not trumpet, pace, or cry. They simply stood. From that distance their outline softened into the color of the land, gray-gold forms against thorn and sky. The lead figure stood square, ears fanned slightly, body facing the clearing. Behind her, the others waited like stones waiting for water to pass. The injured elephant shifted again. Her back leg twitched once. Her chest rose in a longer, slower breath. Her ears pressed back, then forward. And then stillness again. The matriarch on the ridge let out one long note. It wasn't loud. It didn't split the air like a warning or call for aid. It trembled downward like a slow exhale turned inside out. A promise. The ranger nearest the injured elephant stepped back. Not in fear, in reverence. They had seen this before, once or twice maybe in other parts of the reserve, the way elephants arrived like memory does. Not rushed, not summoned, but because something in the ground still tethered them. Whether by scent, by sound, by whatever bond made them what they were, they came. No one moved to meet them. The injured one stirred. A soft groan pressed from her throat, more vibration than noise. Her trunk touched the earth again, this time not in collapse, in feeling, the kind of gesture that searched for what wasn't visible. The wind passed again, brushing across the clearing, carrying with it dry pollen, the scent of leaves bruised by feet, and something faintly sour, old dung or trampled bark, familiar smells, herd smells. The 4 elephants on the ridge did not move forward. Not yet. The matriarch shifted her weight once, then stilled again. One of the younger rangers took a breath as if to speak, then stopped. Another turned and checked the water basin, adding more without sound. The vet placed a hand briefly on the wire coil now half buried in dust and said nothing. Time bent there. The light thinned. Night approached, but they did not leave. As the last of the sun turned the ridge to fire-edge silhouettes, the matriarch let out one final sound. This time it was brief, just enough to carry the distance, just enough to fall across the elephant in the clearing like a memory. She closed her eyes for a moment and held still, and though she did not rise, her body had changed. No longer the weight of surrender, now the posture of listening. The rangers moved further back. The clearing felt smaller, not in size, in ownership. The injured one no longer lay alone. There was presence now, even without touch, even without approach. Something had been returned to her through that low sound and the waiting shape above. The matriarch stepped forward once, just one pace down the slope, then stopped. Behind her the others waited, unmoving. A nightjar called from a nearby tree. The sky darkened, and in the hush before full night, when the grass turned from gold to shadow and the dust lost its shape, the injured elephant lifted her trunk an inch off the ground, just enough to feel the cooling air, and let out the faintest breath as if giving something back. Something not broken, just remembered. The ridge held its stillness through the night. The matriarch did not leave. The others behind her stayed as quiet shapes against the darkened slope, unmoving except for the rise and fall of breath. No challenge, no rush, just presence. The wind softened and shifted again, rising through the brush in small lifts, bending the thorn trees with the kind of respect usually reserved for the very old. The injured elephant remained where she was, but her ear tilted now and then. She was no longer only watching, she was waiting. By dawn, the first light came not with color, but with silence, the kind that is not empty, but expectant. Birds didn't call yet. Insects kept their wings folded. Even the ranger's breath felt quieter, as if something in the clearing did not belong to them anymore, and they knew it. The matriarch moved. One step, then a long pause, then another. She came down the slope without sound, her feet, pressing into the dust with centuries behind them. Her body bore the marks of age, loose skin near the shoulders, a scar under her right eye, and a torn fringe on her left ear that moved slightly with each breath. She did not trumpet. She made no calls, but the way she moved, deliberate, unblinking, was its own language, a statement more than a signal. The rangers did not speak. They had gathered early before the first hint of her descent, sensing the day might shift. The vet knelt again near the clearing's edge, but not too close. One ranger crouched at a distance, eyes half lowered, hands resting lightly over his knees. The youngest of them had stopped breathing through his mouth entirely, afraid even that might intrude. No one reached for a camera. She walked in a straight line, not toward the humans, not around them, toward the one who had lain 3 days without standing, without sound, without even resistance, toward the one who had once shared a scent, a season, a memory that still lived somewhere behind the eyes. If she had come with purpose, it did not rise from urgency. It came from recognition. When she reached the clearing, she paused again. The injured elephant did not lift her head. She did not need to. She had felt her coming. The matriarch stood over her in silence, the sun lifting behind her shoulders. Dust rose and fell around her legs. The younger rangers noted, without speaking, how large she was. Not just in size, but in bearing. She didn't scan the surroundings. She didn't inspect. She knew what this was. She reached her trunk forward and lowered it, slowly, to touch the head of the elephant on the ground. It was not a search. It was not an invitation. It was remembrance. The contact was light. Not a press, not a rap, just the tip of her trunk resting across the top of the younger one's skull between the eyes, where the skin folds but doesn't crease. She held it there. No movement, no vocalization, only weightless pressure, like the memory of water on dry earth. The elephant on the ground exhaled, not the shallow pant of pain, a full breath, low, long, whole. And then, for the first time since she'd been found, she moved. Not all at once. It started with the shoulder, where the muscle twitched beneath the cloth, then the hip, shifting against the packed dust. Her good hind leg pressed faintly down, just enough to lift a fraction of her side. She groaned. Soft, more effort than distress, and her trunk curled toward the matriarch's with a tremor that passed through the air like sound. The matriarch did not step back. She stayed. Her trunk lifted slightly and returned to the younger one's temple, slower this time, with the curve of breath behind it. The elephant on the ground tried again. This time her leg bent inward, pulling under the weight of her ribs. Her front feet scraped the dirt, not rising but dragging, as if reminding the earth of their shape. One of the soaked cloths slipped free and lay beside her, dark with dust and water. A ranger stepped forward to catch it, then stopped. No one entered the moment. They only bore witness. The injured one pressed harder with her rear leg. Her whole side lifted, unsteadily, and fell back. She did not collapse. She reset. She took a breath again, longer this time, and reached forward with her good front foot, carving a new mark in the dust. The sun rose further. The light shifted from pale to gold. The matriarch stepped sideways. Not away, alongside. She stood with her body parallel now, giving space without retreating. Her ear flicked once, brushing the air. Her trunk hung low, coiled at the tip, and her eyes, dark and unblinking, remained fixed on the younger one's face. A third attempt came. The hind leg pushed, the shoulder twisted. Her trunk pressed against the ground and helped lever her chest upright. Her front feet flattened, her neck pulled forward with a groan that rippled through her chest. For a moment she hung in the balance, too high to be lying, too low to be standing, and then, with a sound that came more from the earth than her throat, she rose, first to her knees, then her front legs straightened. Her hind legs followed, quivering beneath her weight. She stood, unsteady, wide-legged, trembling, but upright. The matriarch stepped forward and touched her flank, firm now. Then her shoulder, then her neck. No vocalization, just touch. The younger elephant shifted her weight, winced, then adjusted again. Her injured leg hovered, then set lightly down, enough to test, not to bear. Her trunk reached out and brushed against the matriarch's chest, resting there, then curling back. The rangers remained still. They didn't speak. One of them, standing behind the canvas shade, let his shoulders fall and clasped his hands in front of him. Nothing more. The matriarch turned slowly, not in retreat, but in invitation. She began to walk. Not quickly, not far. Just 5 steps toward the opening in the thorn brush that led to the broader scrubland. She paused there. The younger elephant did not follow. She swayed, regained her balance, then lifted her head higher than she had in days. The light caught her face, the edge of her ear, the ridge above her eye, the faint smear of dried salve along her temple, and turned it to gold. She took 1 step forward, then another, and stopped beside the matriarch. For a moment they stood together, the younger leaning slightly inward, the older bearing the lean without shifting. Dust moved around their feet, rising faintly, then settling. Then, as the light climbed and the sounds of morning returned, distant bird call, the hum of bees in thorn blooms, a rustle of wind beyond the trees. The 2 elephants walked slowly toward the brush. Not far, not fast, but together. Behind them, the rangers did not move. The vet lowered his eyes and pressed his hand briefly to the center of his chest. The wire lay forgotten beneath a bush. The water bowl sat half full, and in the spot where she had once been still, where the dust had kept her shape for 3 long days, only her scent remained, and the faint curve of her trunk's final mark in the soil. No one filled it in. They let the wind do that. And as the matriarch and the younger elephant stepped into the brushlight side by side, the herd on the ridge began to descend. Dawn arrived without fanfare. No great color spilled across the horizon, no rush of birds in the trees, just a thin, silvered light spreading across the land. Quiet, wide, soft-edged. The kind of morning that doesn't announce itself, only slips in and takes its place. She was already standing. Not tall, not strong, but upright. The younger elephant held her posture like something both earned and borrowed. Her legs still trembled at the joints, especially the injured one, which she kept just shy of full weight. But she no longer looked like something left behind. She looked like something in motion, even while still. Beside her, the matriarch stood in silence. She hadn't moved much through the night save to circle once, checking the trees, brushing against a branch that startled a nightjar into flight. Now she remained close, flanking her not as protector, but as reminder. The bond between them was not young. It had not begun in this clearing. The herd came before the sun cleared the ridge. 4 figures, slow-moving, deliberate, silent. They stepped through the thorn trees and down into the lowland like they'd done it 100 times, though none had crossed that slope in weeks. One by one, they neared the 2 who waited. The matriarch stepped aside to make room. The injured elephant turned her head toward the sound before they arrived. Her ear lifted, her trunk curled. She didn't call out, didn't reach, just waited. The first to reach her was a smaller female, younger but not calf-like, with a soft V-shaped notch in her left ear. She paused within touching distance and then let her trunk lift, slow, careful, and brush lightly along the injured one's side. A second joined, and then the third, older and heavier, ears draped like fabric. The last to come stood at a slight distance, then closed the space in 3 steps and lowered his head, touching her flank with a breath more than a sound. And then the circle closed. Not tight, not hurried, just enough to be whole. The rangers stayed back near the canvas, near the shallow basin and the supplies that had become unnecessary sometime in the night. They did not call out, did not make record. Only the oldest among them, the one who had found her, moved slightly forward, stopping near the edge of the clearing where the snare had once been left. He crouched, picked it up, not to carry it away, but just to look at it one last time. A loop of twisted metal, now quiet in his hand. She wasn't alone, he said quietly. She was remembered. No one replied. They didn't need to. The injured elephant took a step. Her gait was uneven, a half limp, but not faltering. Her trunk drifted down toward the dirt and brushed against the spot where the cloth had once laid. She did not pause there, just acknowledged it in the way elephants did, by marking it with presence. Then another step, and the herd moved with her. They didn't rush ahead or flank her with urgency. They matched her slow rhythm with an almost perfect balance, letting her pace be the center of theirs. The matriarch trailed last now, her torn ear catching the wind. The brush opened easily before them, the path rising slightly toward the first rise of the valley. Every few feet, the younger elephant paused as if to feel the weight of the earth beneath her again. No sound accompanied their movement but the steady thud of feet pressing into dry soil, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the occasional creak of thorn branches pushed aside. She didn't look back, not once, but the clearing did not forget her. The rangers remained still until the last of the herd vanished into light, not dust, not shadow, but the kind of brightness that dissolves shape without blinding. Birdsong returned in pieces. One call near the acacia, another from the far tree. Life came back not with noise, but with rhythm. The vet stepped forward and looked toward the rise where the silhouettes had vanished. He said nothing. He only wiped his hands on the leg of his trousers, more out of habit than need. The ranger who held the snare laid it at the base of a tree. Then he turned and walked back into the clearing. Behind them, the shape of her body still lay traced in the dust. A shallow imprint, soft at the edges, already filling with the breeze. One cloth remained near the center, half buried, still damp. The vet retrieved it and folded it into the supply bag. The shade tarp flapped gently and then fell still. Nothing else moved, but the air had changed. It was lighter now, less pressed, the kind of lightness that doesn't erase pain but carries it more gently. "She'll scar," one ranger said softly, as if speaking the wound aloud would help settle its place in the story. "She'll heal," another replied, and then they began to pack. There was no ceremony, no speech, but the way they rolled each cloth, cleaned each basin, and swept away broken branches felt like a kind of closing, not erasure but respect. When the truck engine started, it did so slowly. The tires moved without carving deep. At the top of the ridge, the breeze shifted again, curling down into the clearing like breath. No elephant stood there now, but something still did. A shape left in silence, a memory in dust, a promise kept.